But now we're starting to get down to those granular levels of the subgenres. Audiences are becoming attuned to those subgenres, and the algorithms are becoming attuned to those sorts of things too. And I think, again, that's where the AI starts to become really interesting. Is we as humans only have so many data points that we can really notice and collect and, run the experiments on ourselves. But with AI and more computerized technology and this and that, to look at all of these data points, consume and ingest all of these different videos from all these different creators, from all these different verticals, and look for stuff that we train it to do, but then also look beyond what we train it to do.
In this episode, we talk with one of the most successful couples on YouTube, Matthew and Stephanie Patrick. MatPat is best known for his channels, The Game Theorist, The Film Theorist, and Stephanie joins him as a co-host for GT Live. In addition to the 20 million subscribers and 60 million video monthly viewers, Stephanie and Matthew also own Theorist Media, using data-based methods to accelerate growth on social media.
This is Creative Disruption, the intersection where entertainment, data, and creativity meet. Here's your hosts, Ricky Ray Butler and Derral Leaves.
All right, welcome back to Creative Disruption, where we talk with the people that are actually disrupting the industry. And I'm super excited for today's guests. But before we get to them, Ricky Ray Butler, how's it going, my man?
It's going well.
Going good. Do you know, I was reading this article today, and it was kind of freaking me out a little bit. So SpaceX is launching up satellites in, the atmosphere and so on and so forth to create a global internet. And the first thing that comes back to me is like Skynet. Like, seriously, it's Skynet. It's like, because like today's topic, we're going to talk really in depth about AI. And I'm like, oh man, this is going to be, the topic at hand.
Yeah, I'm excited about what SpaceX is doing. I actually invested.
You're excited to get killed by a Terminator robot?
No. I don't think the Skynet stuff is going to be happening. I think what's going to happen.
We can disagree on that one.
I think what's going to happen is going to empower loads and loads of people, billions of people, to have free internet that maybe didn't have it before, and have access and be able to educate themselves. And I think there's going to be a lot of good that happens as a result of it.
No, I agree, and I hope there's no doom and gloom of some killer robot that comes after me and my family. I think that would be very horrible for that. But I do agree with you. It's like I served for my church down in South America in Paraguay, and I was like in the jungle, and I went into this place that they didn't even have running water. They didn't even have power. And I'm like, there's just no place for these people to really get a leg up. The education was horrible. And then the cell phone came out and internet came out. And what was amazing is one of the kids that was actually living in that house, that hut, is a programmer that lives in Uruguay now, because he went on YouTube and YouTube was teaching him how to program things without a computer. All he had was his phone and a really, really good mind. I mean, it was just super amazing.
Well, I mean, it's just going to be interesting to see how, that industry specifically evolves. How's this going to affect AT&T? How's it going to affect Verizon? Like, what are they going to need to do, to deal with this? And how well is it going to work? Is it really going to be, are we going to really be able to provide more people more internet? But
yeah, it'd be interesting. I think we're, on the press. Basically, we're on the front of a lot of new creators coming up and a lot of new creativity that's going to disrupt the industry. I'm really excited for our topic today, and we have some amazing guests that are coming on to discuss it. And it's like a big shift. I know a lot of content creators are really upset right now with YouTube because they say YouTube's killing my channel. But yet they're blaming it on the AI, where Google Brain is now running, YouTube and really just suggesting to people what videos to watch. Yeah. And these creators that just put out mediocre content or content that didn't really connect with, an audience is now being irrelevant.
Or not having the ability to evolve with the changes. And so, we're going to have Matt, Pat, and Steph. Join Stephanie. Excuse me, Matt, Pat,
Steph.
Good. Okay, good. Hey. We're the short. Thank you. Well, anyways, we're gonna have Matt, Pat, and Steph, who I believe are some of the smartest people when it comes to the algorithm on social media video.
Shucks, that means a lot, Ricky. Thank you.
No, I really, I feel like I'm going to be the one that gets a lot of education today, because we're going to have these guys,
as well as you,
Derral, that have a great background in algorithms.
It's going to be so awesome.
And AI, but no, it's going to be great to be able to get your perspective, on what's changing with AI and with the YouTube algorithm, or algorithms.
Right, at this
as well as
point.
Facebook or Twitch. I mean, you guys are very well versed across all the different platforms, and we're excited to dive deep into that. But first of all, can you guys just give us a quick background on you both, and then like what currently, I mean, you guys are interested in right now? Like what's something that's just really rocking your world?
Ooh, what's rocking our world right now?
man.
Start.
Well, first
Okay.
of all, thank you so much. We're so excited to be here. You have so many famous people that you're talking to, and then you're talking to us, and so it's like, oh man,
Right? It's like, oh, here's this Oscar-winning director. Oh, and then these two nerds from YouTube. Like,
and
thank
these
you guys.
geeks who have these YouTube channels, whatever. So
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
I feel lucky that I even know you guys. I mean, you guys are so respected in the industry, and whenever I meet with you, whenever like we go out or anything like that, I'm always learning something. And so this is kind of like a selfish indulgence, I guess.
There we go.
Like,
Selfish
we're not
indulgence.
like,
Ricky
hey,
Butler.
dance. Give us all your knowledge, you know.
well, we feel the same about you. I can give a quick background. Think about stuff we're into.
That we're really excited about right now. Okay,
Yes,
I'll think about
Start
it.
thinking. So we run the Game Theorists, the Film Theorists, and GT Live YouTube channels. So we have 3 channels. And together they're quick math. Like 20
Together we
million
have
subscribers.
27 million total social followers
Yeah.
across all the different platforms. Yeah.
Yeah, 20 million coming from YouTube, and we nerd out about all sorts of things in pop culture and basically fuse entertainment with education to look at your favorite movies, TV shows, and video games through the lens of science. So like math, physics, biology, to help you learn something while doing it through the lens of something you already love.
Yeah, a recent favorite of ours, actually, that went up not too long ago, is we calculated the total number of characters who die in Disney animated movies by doing things like analyzing, okay, how many lions and hyenas and plains animals die in Lion King during Scar's 5-year reign, and calculating like, oh, it's 5 years because Simba leaves the pride when he's X tall, and then he comes back and he's a fully maned adult, which is usually around 5 years old. And how tall is Pride Rock? And how long out into the distance is the horizon? And what's that territory encompass? And how much? So that is the sort of nerdy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is the
First
sort
off,
of nerdy.
It gets
who
real
even
nerdy.
thinks about that stuff?
Clearly me. We are answering the questions that no one needed to know the answers to. No one cares.
To do that, we had to watch every single Disney animated movie because there are there are death counts out there that exist online, but they're not comprehensive. So we had to go back and watch every single Disney animated.
Oh sure,
movie.
and you're like, oh, how hard can that be? Because
No,
you're watching
no,
like
no.
Lion King and Mulan and
You
all
just
those
just wanna-
classics.
you just wanna die.
But then
I
you
mean,
get into like the deep cuts of like Make Mine Music and Melody Time, and you're like, ooh, these have not aged well. Oh. Disney sweeping those under the rug. But basically the channel started about 7-8 years ago at this point, where we were both in kind of a transitional phase. Stephanie was graduating from grad school for pharmacology, and I was transitioning out of theater at the time. And it was during the economic slump, and no one really wanted to hire me, even though I had all this background knowledge. Like I was valedictorian, I had a double major in theater and neuroscience. I had directed all these shows.
Neuroscience. That's so
Oh, is that weird?
both sides of the brain right there.
Is that unusual? I mean, it is weird in retrospect to look at that and be like, what was I planning on doing with theater and neuro? Like the neuroscience was the backup plan. But no, it actually, you look at where we are today, and we're in this really fascinating area where those two things work perfectly together. Where
Culture and science.
digital video is an ecosystem that is a creative platform, creative platforms that require content, but that are built and maintained by algorithms and by people who think in numbers and formulas, and that give you back analytics that you can then use to inform your creative decisions moving forward. And so those two really merge together really nicely.
Even what we're talking about today, right, with AI, really takes it takes understanding how the human brain works and basically digitizing it, right? And talking about how we can get as much data as possible about how people's behavior works, whether they're, engaging online or in a movie theater or whatever kind of entertainment they're consuming, whatever they want to get out of the platforms that they're using. It's taking how well can a machine understand how the human brain works, and applying that, I mean, in our case, to entertainment. And so weirdly, like through whatever serendipity, we've ended up at this interesting crossroads where both of us have a data background, but we work on this creative platform, and those two worlds have been able to come together really well.
And you also have an agency as well, right?
We do, yes. So in addition to, running kind of the production end of things where we have our three main channels, we also consult brands, other YouTubers, both large and small, across everything from optimizing their content to creatively developing their content with them to, how to make your influencer campaign run better, everything, how do you read analytics, and then not just on YouTube, but then other social platforms as well.
Yeah, our goal with that has been to go in with an all ships rise kind of mentality, where we realized that we were doing things more intentionally, it seemed like, than other people in the space, and we were really trying to pay close attention to our data and other people outside of us and our channels, whether it's other YouTube creators or brands or whatever, were either not sure how to deal with that data. They didn't want to deal with that data. They were like, no, things have been functioning fine the way they are for decades. I don't need
lot
your
of
data.
In the space.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed that.
YouTubers less so now, but it used to be that they really functioned off of superstition. It was like, I have to click my heels 3 times before hitting publish, and that's the only thing that makes my video perform. It was literally like that kind of craziness. And so our thought was that, like, no, if we can talk to people about how to actually analyze their own performance, they're not going out there and saying things like YouTube is broken, because they can actually look at their own performance and say, well, this isn't working out as well as I'd like, but by reading my data and understanding it, I can figure out how to fix it, how to iterate, how to get better, and how to sort of ride the wave of, kind of where digital was going.
Yeah, and this was especially true for brands in the early days too, where we would reach out to people and be like, hey, we would be really excited to partner with you on an upcoming project. And the response we'd get back is, oh no, we've done digital video, we've dipped our toe in it. We did one video and it didn't work. It got like 0 views, 100 views, whatever. Like, there's clearly no market here. Like, there is no future here. And we're like, we disagree.
One sample with a one-off video.
Right? I mean, obviously.
They told the creator, no, you have to do it like this. You can't be yourself.
Yeah.
Can't be authentic.
Yeah.
You have to do it
Make
this
sure our
way.
creative director's on the set.
Yeah.
Because they obviously know how to create video better than you.
Isn't that how good content gets made? And isn't that how science works? Like, you have an N of 1, and you're like, oh, well, that was a fail.
was great.
Well, we didn't cure cancer this time. Too bad. I guess that's uncurable. Yeah, ship that one out. No, and so we would have enter into these conversations with brands and be like, hey, we will do a video with you for free to start off with, but do it with us, and we will prove to you the value that this space has to offer. And we would do the video, we would do the partnership, and they would come back to us.
I never got a deal like that.
Sorry.
I mean, you weren't early enough, buddy. I'm sorry. I hate to break that one to you. But it was one of those things where, but now hopefully you're seeing the ramifications of us kind of spreading the good word.
Working with you guys, we've given you guys a handful of clients.
Yeah.
That where we've come in and had integrations within your content, and it's a consistent ROI. Mm-hmm. And that's why we keep bringing business back to you, because there's a return.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. We better keep it up.
Very good engagement, and then you make it an opportunity where the brand can help empower the content,
right,
rather than disturb it.
Yeah.
And it works really well.
Right, that's exactly it. And so in those early days, it was a real big focus of ours to help preach the good word about this space and help people understand it, because there is a really big learning curve here. And it's even bigger now than it's ever been. Like, every year it gets more and more difficult to enter into these digital platforms. Yes, absolutely on YouTube, but all of these digital video platforms. And so if we can help ease that learning curve and empower brands, creators, whoever, to make better content and see more success here, creativity rises, the overall ecosystem rises, and everyone benefits.
Absolutely. So you've been on YouTube almost since the beginning. I mean, you've been out there when you're unemployable.
Right, yeah, that's true.
What do we do?
Excuse me, I was very employable. People just didn't see it correctly, okay?
So you started making video content, and the ecosystem of YouTube back then versus now has really transformed. It's really changed. There's ways to game it back then to get found and followers and views and so on and so forth. And now it's not as easy to do that. It's hard to be discovered if you're not doing the things that the AI wants. Like, tell us about that transition as a creator and those that you've worked with, and then really specifically when Google Brain took over YouTube and started to be the AI for YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely.
We like to talk about like generations that we've seen on
absolutely.
YouTube, and I think that corresponds to a lot of what you see in the evolution of the platform as a whole, and how data savvy creators have become. That because basically, and we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast started, where people who were on YouTube and really successful in the beginning were successful by accident, and also it ties into all of the superstition and everything. And then you have a couple of generations, later to the generation that we're in now, which is kids 15, 19, maybe like 21 kind of age range, who at this point have grown up with YouTube, right? They were the first generation who looked at YouTube and at big YouTube stars and said, I want to be that as a career. They were the first people to identify YouTube as a career aspiration and then go after it and then figure out what it took to get there. And they did that in a really methodical way, a lot of them. The biggest successes that you see on YouTube, or the ones that you've seen sort of pop up out of almost nowhere over the last few years, including like the Jakes and Logan Pauls of the world, Rice Gum and Collins Key and there are a whole handful that you can just wrangle off. James Charles is a great example. They're all young. They all grew up with YouTube. They all knew exactly what they wanted to do. They didn't stumble into this by accident, and they looked at what made the people before them successful. They looked at trends they could ride. They understood the importance of keywords in your titles and tagging appropriately and calls to action and creating communities and tropes within your channels. And so you see them sort of tick off all of these boxes of everything that they've learned from the generations of YouTubers who have come before them. And by generation, I mean like 3 years worth, But they know, and they've implemented it all from the start, which has played extremely well into sort of not gaming in a bad way, but taking advantage of what they know about audience behavior and then understanding how YouTube treats certain types of audience behavior. If the audience watches longer, then your content gets promoted. So they put the most exciting part of the video 2/3 of the way in. So they make sure that people watch all the way through. They understand the importance of calling to subscribe and ringing the bell and doing all those other things that play into the data-driven system that's underlying all of their content. Yeah. And they've been extremely smart about it. The new generation of creators are just incredibly smart.
Off the charts. I mean, I spent some time with Mr. Beast, which I love his
Oh my gosh, he's phenomenal.
Like, seriously, like one of the smartest creators, and he's been doing it since he was 12. Mm-hmm. And all he was looking at is patterns, and what he told me next literally blew my mind. He goes, "I treat it like a video game. Mm-hmm. It's a video game."
Yeah, absolutely.
And he goes, "I just know how to maneuver." And sure enough, he knows how to get those clickbaity. I won't even use clickbaity. It's clickable titles.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's clickable.
Clickable titles.
I mean, some of them. I love Mr. Beast, but some of them are a little bit clickbaity. Those magnets didn't stop that high-speed rifle bullet. Let's be honest here. Were there really 20,000 magnets? No, but really, they are very, very clickable.
But they grow up on that, and then two, it's like really knowing what people were wanting to watch. What are they going to click on? Mm-hmm. How are you going to engage with them? What's the right hook? What's the right really to bring them back into the story? Mm-hmm. And watching your channels, I mean, I've been really impressed. Like your pacing is very systematic and scientific. Mm-hmm. And I look at probably the most successful channels out there is they have their own pacing and they understand the pacing of the audience. Yeah. And that's what is able to grow. And I won't say the new algorithm. Basically, the algorithm is looking at so many different things, but it is what is the viewer really doing? Mm-hmm. Are they watching? Are they engaging? Yeah. How are they engaging? Are they coming back day after day? Mm-hmm. How are they going from there? And it's like a totally different ecosystem than YouTube was before. It was like, oh, it has a whole bunch of views. Okay, that's great.
Right.
Yeah.
You're made.
Right.
And when Google Brain took over is really when we started talking about deep neural networks, right? Yeah. And we started talking about the idea of AI-driven platforms and AI-driven entertainment. I mean, it was really just such an incredible milestone. And you also have, on Facebook, you have, what is it? Torch, I think it's run. Their AI system is run by Torch. Anyway, so you have analogous systems across other types of entertainment and media consumption platforms as well. But you get to so many more inputs than were ever possible to calculate and take into account before. And if you ask people, like, there are still some that definitely pop out, right? So watch time is still huge, right? People want you to stay on their platform. YouTube wants you to stay on YouTube. So watch time is always going to be, a big factor, or at least, for the foreseeable future. But, the idea of freshness and the idea of like very granular parts of user behavior, like are they scrolling while they're watching, or are they commenting while they're watching, all sorts of these other factors that I think even 5 years ago were never taken into account or never even thought about.
Well, and I think that's the really interesting thing here. You mentioned Mr. Beast, and him noticing trends that just worked for his content, right? Like, and some of it is explicit that you can actually measure in the quantitative data that YouTube delivers back to you, right? So I can tell you for certainty that using the numerical value of a number will always get you more clicks than using the number written out in the title. Like, that is just a fact of human behavior.
Yeah, it's like
the
a
data proves it
psychology
time and time
thing,
again,
yeah.
and it's something that I'm sure he might not be able to explicitly say, like, oh, the data has shown this, but he, as a creator, from watching the trends on his own channel, notices that, and you'll see that every single video has like 1 million Orbeez or 20,000 whatever. Like, people
how to spend
like
$100,000 in 1 hour.
Yeah, like that sort of stuff. And it's one of those things that just creators implicitly just like they start to really kind of notice about their own content. What we've really tried to do is explicitly in the data run A/B tests on a lot of our own content and see where those lines exist and what's working and what isn't in a very highly variable system. And the fascinating thing about AI and kind of where a lot of the potential here exists is, there's only so many explicit data points that we can really pick up on. And there's only so much that we can really measure through the data that we have.
And then when you combine those,
cadence, for instance, where, cadence, there is no true metric of cadence. Although we, in the early days, did do a measure of what is the general pace of a YouTube video versus someone speaking versus whatever. Yeah, exactly. How many? We were to actually calculate how many words per second it was.
It's gotten way faster, and we go through. We actually did a study across different genres of YouTube as well to figure out which ones had the fastest and slowest cadence. So like. Some of the vlogger and entertainment channels have the fastest cadence, and then some of the educational channels are slower. And then you have this this pretty interesting, very formulaic kind of set of cadence across different genres. It's very interesting, but you can do all of that stuff.
But it's one of those things now where
it's going to work.
Exactly. Beauty has a different cadence than automotive, than education, than whatever else, than gaming.
Yeah. It's easy for people to look at digital video and just assume that all of it is equivalent, but it's not. Just like entertainment isn't equivalent. A drama is very different than a comedy. Likewise, the pacing of a YouTube dramatic video is going to be very different than the pacing of a YouTube vlog video. And even within genres of content, it's not equivalent. A gaming video is not all created equal. Like, there's so many subgenres in those fields, and you're starting to see the ecosystem start to mature in that understanding. Yeah. But it's been a slow process, and nowadays, in our consulting business that you mentioned, in our consulting business, it used to be that we would consult on overall vertical trends. Like, hey, you want to do a beauty channel, here's, the tips and tricks. You want to do a gaming channel, here's the optimizations that you want to make. But now we're starting to get down to those granular levels of the subgenres. Audiences are becoming attuned to those subgenres, and the algorithms are becoming attuned to those sorts of things too. And I think, again, that's where the AI starts to become really interesting. Is we as humans only have so many data points that we can really notice and collect and run the experiments on ourselves. But with AI and more computerized technology and this and that, to look at all of these data points, consume and ingest all of these different videos from all these different creators, from all these different verticals, and look for stuff that we train it to do, but then also look beyond what we train it to do, and understand stuff that like we as humans can't articulate,
like unstructured data.
That unstructured data.
You can watch a video 100 times and you're not going to catch everything.
Yes,
right,
exactly.
But the computer does, and with enough training, it starts to really notice and sense those things that like we ourselves can't articulate, but it can suddenly know, like, oh, that's a cue that a normal person wouldn't have picked up on, but it's going to help us inform the creative that much more robustly moving forward.
One of the things, and on a macro scale, one of the things that we've heard complaints about and have complained about ourselves is that YouTube will change too many things at a time and doesn't always understand how changing one thing about the way its algorithm functions will ripple across the rest of the platform.
They'll claim they know what they're doing.
The inclusion of stories on the platform is very important, guys.
Really, really crucial.
7-day-long story, because that was really imperative on the platform.
But with AI technology, you actually have the ability to run models that are so much more sophisticated than here. I'm gonna tweak this knob over here and this knob over here. I hope they don't interfere with each other.
We hope.
Right? Exactly.
If you give it a feedback loop, it's just going to continue to push out more and more iterations.
Exactly. Right. And those iterations can be so much more complex, and you can keep track of so many more variables and how they change each other and how they're going to impact not just the most popular content on the platform that's the most visible, but how is it going to impact creators who are up and coming or specific verticals that may suddenly get buried. You can really sense check some of the changes that humans may want to implement before implementing them and throwing everybody off.
And I think too, it's going in an interesting direction, the AI, and it's really empowering the platform to achieve its goals, which is get more watch time, get people coming back consistently, and it's really featuring creators that are going to appeal to people, watch more, so on and so forth. But I think like there's a thing that I wish YouTube would do, and other things. It's like you have all this data. Like, give us some more tools. Like for me, I would like to create a thumbnail specifically for a specific demographic. And see if it works. And I want to split test that.
Yep,
And I want
absolutely.
to split test this other one because like right now for us to do that, we actually buy ads
Yep.
just to see which has the highest click-through rate.
And that's the way we recommend that consulting clients do it, because we have been asking YouTube for thumbnail A/B testing for 4 years now.
Yeah. And
So I was on a beta like 4 years ago. I don't know if I'm still under NDA. Whatever that is.
We keep hearing
But let
that
me
it
just tell
exists
you, it was
somewhere.
the worst experience because you had to manually send it and then they would switch it. It's like nothing was dynamic.
Yeah.
And I think the thing for me is,
Whereas Facebook
I know
has that
they're
ability.
And it's for A/B testing?
for A/B testing.
Oh,
and,
wow.
and right now, I mean, I'm using TubeBuddy to kind of switch that out, which is great. But what's really interesting though is there's things like I go to Netflix and my wife literally she just goes nuts because I don't watch anything. I'm just flipping through the thumbnails and I'll switch an account and see how different it is. And you go back a couple days or in 2 or 3 days and it's a completely different thumbnail. It's like there is a behavior of dynamic thumbnails. And I would really love to put like, I don't know, 40 different thumbnails in there and let's just test it out and see what works with what demographic and have the AI do stuff like that. Because really, at the end of the day, if they're not clicking on that thumbnail or that title, they're never going to see the content.
No, it's so true, and it's one of those. It's one of the big frustrations that I think that a lot of YouTube creators have is the fact that they have to rely on clickbait, in order to get people. Like, because if you have a poorly optimized thumbnail and title for your video, that video is never going to get watched. You could have the Citizen Kane of YouTube. Citizen Kane wouldn't work on YouTube in the best way possible. You could have the Citizen Kane of YouTube, but if it's not branded well on the cover image and how you're packaging that, it's going to never see the light of day. And so I think a lot of people, again, who are kind of guessing in the dark, would love this sort of feature. The response that we always get back from YouTube, though, when we kind of hold their feet to the fire and we're like, why is this still not a thing? When so many people are eager for it, is that, bad actors will learn to exploit it.
I'm so sick of that term,
Right?
bad actors.
Right?
I'm so sick of that.
Thank
I'll be honest with you.
Right.
Because like for me, at the end of the day, the platform was built on people getting views and they made money on it.
Yeah.
And they facilitated that bad actors, whatever they want to call it. But like I think the market and the viewer will show what content should be made.
Right, that's
and
exactly
they
it.
should enable that.
They already have so many other systems in place to actively strike down these quote-unquote bad actors, right? Like retention time. If your retention curve follows an odd pattern where it drops off pretty substantially in the first couple seconds, the system already knows that you've created clickbait, and that the
Right.
thing, the video that they've clicked through to
need
isn't
for
delivering on the
advertising.
promise of, the packaging that video had. And so then it just disappears. We call it in our consulting the algorithmic shutdown.
Yep.
It just disappears from the platform and it doesn't get any more views. Like, those systems and those protections are in place. And so, the bad actors shouldn't be as much of a concern as you would think that they would be.
And they're a little bit more sensitive with advertisers
Of course.
and so on. But ultimately, and I'd encourage anyone to do this, is really talking about Google Brain. Is there's a tool, Google Vision, which we all use. You can actually put a thumbnail in there, and it will rate it basically if it's safe for advertisers or not.
Yep.
And when I show creators, they're like, oh, I'm getting delisted or I'm not getting monetized.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's just take a look at your thumbnails and your titles. And we basically went through that. And that one little tweak just basically told the AI, oh, we're okay because it's not racy content.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And I think a lot of people too were gun shy about how these sorts of systems roll out, right? And we're seeing it happen again with Tumblr right now,
Right.
where the platform should do a better job of explaining what's really going on. But when YouTube first rolled out the whole demonetization policy, when Tumblr just recently did it for their brand safe content, you see this huge wave of demonetization, or like this is labeled not safe for work, roll out because they're relying on the content, the false flags to train these neural networks of like what is and isn't safe, what does and doesn't fall into these lines, because they are really blurry in a lot of cases. But when the platform doesn't prepare the people who are using the platform for like, hey, you're going to get a lot of false positives. Don't worry,
Yeah.
just challenge them. Like, how hard is that to say? And they would avoid so much negative backlash.
Well, and how many channels did they delete too? I mean,
Right,
they automatically
exactly.
just deleted and like,
Huge
try to
number.
get a hold of YouTube. Good luck on that one.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. No, and so it sends this.
Don't call us, we'll call you.
Well, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier about like it sends this message of panic back to and a reactionary message back to the creators who feel like who feel like they're standing on this unstable platform. They're standing on quicksand. They don't know where the iterations are going to pop up next, and as a result, they complain about YouTube when in actuality it might just be their bad content or
Yeah.
whatever.
Rather than making it an iterative process and explaining to the platform that we are setting a new system in place, this system needs to be trained, participate in the training, and even potentially incentivizing that for creators to make it part of the process of being on YouTube, is that you contribute to the way that YouTube functions. And in that, I think that they would actually win a lot of goodwill toward creators are helping to define the rules of their own system, or giving them some sort of feeling of ownership over what's actually going on. But instead, they sort of spring things on people in the dark. And Tumblr had the same issue.
Yeah. And
Reddit is going
Right,
through the same
thing.
thing.
I mean,
Yeah.
that all the platforms are like, oh, we need to figure out a way to actually
we need
have
to make
brands
money.
on us and make money. Yeah, we have huge audiences.
Hey,
but
we gotta change these over.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the
what's the-
positive side
Sure.
of the AI, because like for me, I'm really fascinated by it. It is like one big video game. It's like really trying to figure out everything that's going on, because it's like there's this curtain that's there, and there's certain things that are going on that you kind of know that's there, and other things that they discuss or you find in white papers or anything like that. But at the end of the day, I believe Google Brain has improved YouTube dramatically. Like getting content, like when I go on, getting content that I want to see is really remarkable, because there's certain gems that are just found. They just know based on my viewing behavior, the way that I interact, that it is serving me content that I would actually watch. And I've just noticed that it's just improving year after year. And the more that I use YouTube, it's getting a lot more defined.
yeah,
I agree with that 100%. I mean, I don't necessarily subscribe as much anymore, though.
well, that's the
Subscriber,
point.
subscribership is at this point a pretty false metric, honestly.
Yeah,
and we tell brands who that we work with, we're like, yeah, we have 11 million subscribers, but you really shouldn't be looking at subscribers
look at-
anymore,
look at the
which
views
is
per video
which is
ad.
People that wanna
weird.
watch me.
We'll
find
see
me.
the correct content being surfaced for them, which is at odds with the way that YouTube still incentivizes subscriber milestones. So it's a system that is maybe in flux and doesn't really work well right now, because on the one hand, YouTube is like, earn your gold play button or earn your diamond play button based on your number of subscribers, rather than something like based on your watch minutes per video, or so whatever it is. I don't know. That's not actually a great metric, but the point is that subscribership does not actually dictate what you're seeing on YouTube at this point, and people are still hung up, and I think they will still be hung up on it for quite a
absolutely.
while. But at this point, like we we get like notifications on our phones for live streams that Markiplier is doing, but we are not subscribed to Markiplier.
Whoa,
on the,
I don't know if you're allowed to say that. Oh my gosh!
Accounts,
Whoa! Don't let that one slip out there.
On the
I
accounts
I love Markiplier's content. He does great stuff. His Let's Plays are delightful.
On the
It's fine.
We have more than one YouTube account. Some of them are subscribed to Markiplier. Some of them might not be. But the point being, it doesn't matter what your subscribership status is, right? We get surfaced stuff on our homepages that's mostly stuff we're not subscribed to. And it's stuff that we watch. We don't need to be subscribed to it. And now the system understands so much more than the explicit data that you give it. And we talk about this a lot as well, which is explicit versus implicit data.
Well,
YouTube has so much more implicit data right now. They don't need you to like a video. They don't need you to subscribe. They don't need you to hit the bell. They don't need you to leave a comment. Those are all explicit data points, and you may love a video, but you might not give it a thumbs up. You might not leave a comment. YouTube can't rely on
If you're
user
watching the whole
input.
thing, they're going to assume that you love it.
Exactly. They can understand your behavior without you having to take an action.
Well,
I think they're ahead of the other platforms.
Oh,
When it comes
yeah.
to that.
by far.
Yeah.
Oh,
by
the-
far.
yes.
Like, Facebook has nothing like that. Instagram tries, Netflix tries, but really, like, YouTube is far beyond. Like,
Sure.
I'm using.
I would
most-
put Amazon there because they know
Sure.
exactly what I want to buy. I mean, every time I go to Amazon, it's like, wait, I need that. One click. Oh, wait, what happened?
Sure.
But look at their
When it comes to
video
content,
product, and it's
yeah.
the most infuriating.
We're
It's
not
so
going on
difficult.
Amazon Video.
But when it
even get me
comes to
started.
what you want to watch, I mean, I found myself. I can't say I'm being unproductive, but like I'm diving to a lot of the education channels.
Yeah.
Like simple. I mean, was it like top tens or like all those different channels that give you a lot of history lessons and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And whenever I go to my homepage now, I don't subscribe to any of these channels now. I will find something that I want to watch, and I'll end up, passively listening to it for a couple hours.
Well, and I think that's the thing that, again, YouTube especially doesn't do a good job of touting its own successes and the way that it's listening to the feedback that it's getting from its users, and especially a lot of its super users, because rewind, say 2 years ago, and YouTube Rewind. Let's not bring that one up.
little too soon.
Is that too soon, guys? I apologize. It happens every year. Sorry. No, but if we were to rewind 2 years ago, one of the big complaints that people had about the system was that there wasn't good discovery mechanisms for smaller channels, and that it was like very top heavy on YouTube, where it was the top creators who were getting all the promotion, they were getting all the suggested video traffic, and they were succeeding, but a lot of smaller and mid-tier creators were struggling to find their audiences because they felt like that they weren't getting suggested video. And certainly some of them weren't doing it in the most optimized ways possible. But you look ahead to YouTube today, and I would say a good 75% of my homepage at this point are channels that I've never seen before, or maybe have watched one video of, that have maybe 10,000, 100,000 subscribers that are just like based on my interest. And so I have found myself subscribing or actively watching and binging a lot of new channels that I would have never come across in my day-to-day usership just from the homepage discovery. And so that's been addressed. Similar with the need to take breaks. Certainly YouTube still has this time crunch around it where, like, it was always that superstition of I can't leave YouTube because as soon as I hop off that treadmill, I lose everything that I've gained, and it just washes away. My audience moves on to the next thing. The algorithm no longer prioritizes me. And, YouTube has done a fairly decent job, and no one's talking about this, but they've done a fairly decent
I've
job.
talked about it quite a bit.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
It
It's
is.
like
They've done a really good job addressing it.
all your views are now coming after that first initial push. It's like literally 45 days after, you're going to see a ton.
Yep.
I mean, I own a lot of channels. I don't like to talk about it, but we own quite a few.
Hashtag humble brag. Of course.
No. But it's stuff that I don't go and promote
Yeah.
or anything like that. But they get a ton of views, and it's all 90 days out, year out, 2 years out.
Yep.
Content that's already there in the library, and it gives me a lot of data points that's there. And a lot of people say, "Well, I can't take a break." I'm like, "Yes, you can."
Yep.
But the type of content that you're maybe creating, you can't take a break. If you're doing a vlog where you wake up in the morning and go all the way to the evening, and you're putting it out the next day, well, of course you can't take a break.
Right.
Well, is it because you need to have something that's going to have residuals, where there's going to be more and more viewers that are searching it? I mean, what do you mean by you can't take a break? How do you avoid I mean,
How do you avoid
Yeah.
it? Well, you got to create content that is more evergreen. You got to like a standalone. So if it's just like one event, hey, I did it. It's my birthday party, whatever it is. People, it might not have any relevance for anyone there.
Yeah.
But if it's more standalone, where it's like it's its own thing, people watch it. Yeah, it might get more views seasonally or whatever it may be. There might be moments that it'll have more views, but ultimately it's something that can continue on every day.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so
it-
there's more long tail.
And it, and it was
tail,
also
yeah.
one of those things too, where it used to be like, wow, I need just a vacation, and I'm not going to put up videos for a couple weeks, a month, whatever. You would come back, and there would be some level of throttling in the system, where like that next upload that you did would have lost kind of the trajectory that you were headed on. Like, you were getting shown to a smaller percentage of your overall viewership because you took that break. But YouTube, hearing that concern, has really addressed that, where now that video that you come back on, like, will get disseminated to a decent sized proportion of your audience. The problem is, though, you have to you get one shot in the chamber. This is from kind of our studies of the platform right now, where you can take that break, but make sure that you're coming back on a video that's going to really reactivate those audiences. Because YouTube's going to be like, oh, this is a channel that people were really actively engaged with when they stopped uploading. Here's their new upload. Let's send it back out to them. But if all of a sudden that video doesn't perform out of the gate, YouTube's going to be like, okay, everyone's kind of grown out of this one. They're not interested in this one anymore. Let's move it on. Yeah, it's a high risk reward model.
There's some really
but it
good
can work.
Yeah, there's some really good examples of that one.
Oh, I'm waiting for all those documentaries to come out when
I know. Well, and speaking of actually, that's one of the best examples of this whole the Shane Dawson documentaries are the perfect example of this.
Amazing,
The Epic Rap Battles of History is also an example of a channel who's one of the few who's managed to do it actually historically, where they actually function on seasons, where most channels can't do that. But that model is now becoming more and more feasible. Again, as long as you're prepared and when you come back, you're really ready to get back into it and knock it out of the park, hopefully.
And I think the big thing for me is that the AI is really helping creators know what to create. I had a client come to me and says, oh, YouTube's killing my channel, I'm dying, blah, blah, blah. I says, well, let's kind of dive in and see what's actually going on. And the tools now that creators have is just off the charts. Like, I was really excited when real-time analytics came in. I'm like, hey, we see stuff in real time.
Right?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
I was the only one that was geeking out. I was like, hey, But at the end of the day, the new tool set that we have is just literally off the charts, because I've always wanted click-through data. Like, that for me, I felt is that's the trigger that starts the wheels really going in. And
It's one of the only things I care about.
Right, absolutely,
Right?
sure.
And the new tools that creators have now, having them know how to read it is a completely different thing. And
Right.
So this client came in and says, YouTube's just killing my channel. Well, let's take a look at your content. And I says, let's look at we'll put them in groups. Like, let's go ahead and take a look at your most performing content. Let's see what's going on there, and your least performing content, and then your latest content.
Yeah.
So we basically had a couple things, and they were kind of blown away that their new content sucks.
Right.
But I have an audience. They love me. I'm like, well, they can only love you so much when you're putting out crap.
Right, yeah.
And what's great, though, is you can pinpoint, and you can start to see patterns, and you can start to see things. And the tools that we have now gives the creator a little bit more control to create better content from my perspective.
Going back to talking about the thumbnail A/B testing, YouTube has set up everything you would need for that process with the new impressions and specifically the impressions click-through rate and stuff like that, because it targets exactly that. If you had the ability to A/B test thumbnails, you have all of the other data and all the other tools you would need to actually make functional experiments out of that. The stuff that they're adding is really exciting. We talk to them a lot. We actually, we see all of the beta versions of new creator studios that come out, a few months in advance. We give feedback on the layout and, hey, can you have this drop down menu, or hey, can you make sure that people can cross this data?
Groups.
Yeah.
I need groups
Thank
in the
you.
other.
Thank you. I'm like, you
how am I
cannot
supposed
get
to-
rid of groups.
I'm like for me, I'm like, I went through this whole thing. I have to click back and I leave a little survey every time. I'm like,
Groups.
You're killing me. Groups.
Groups.
I need
Groups.
time.
I
Like,
know.
How are you supposed to ever know patterns
Yeah.
between videos if you can't group them together?
Thank
unbelievable.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's driving
that's
us
my
nuts.
number one complaint.
We should
It's
start something.
I know,
just
right?
No, absolutely. We're actually due for an email to
well,
the team. Actually.
the thing was, and I said that like 6 months ago, and they were like, "Well, what do you use Groups for?" And I was like, "Everything."
Literally
That's
everything.
why I think every YouTube employee should be a creator, because I mean,
Yeah.
they need to go through the pain points here.
Yeah.
It's so true. But going back to what you were saying about, like, hey, your content sucks. That's the scary thing about data, and I think that's one of the fascinating things about data, right? Is when you look at the data around what you're doing on a creative project, it's a very humbling process, and it can be a very scary process, because you do start to realize that this thing, like, that you put hours of your life into, that you put your creative passions into or whatever, just isn't working for some reason. Like, oh, it was a failure, and I need to change, and I need to iterate, and I need to move on. And I think it's one of those things that a lot of people, especially coming from the creative and entertainment industries, aren't comfortable doing, and you're starting to see that shift happen. But it was one of those things that, like, in the early days, like, I was consulting for a completely different project that was like, we can help optimize your digital video ads and this and that, get more ROI out of what you're working on. And time again, we heard the catchphrase from people being like, we don't look at the data, we're scared of the data, like, we are uncomfortable.
We don't look at it.
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, it was because, like, oh, my job's on the line, and so
Right,
if
I mean,
all
that
of a
was
sudden
it.
I have something that underperforms or underdelivers or whatever, my job is at risk. Whereas today, and our response was always like, yeah, but it gives you so much more control over the funnel,
Absolutely.
the watch funnel of, like, you can find your customer, you can find the views, you can funnel them down through a click-through, you can see how many people convert off of this link to that link and then ultimately become a converting subscriber. Why would you not want that data and that level of knowledge about what you're doing? And you can optimize and iterate and find the most optimal way to find your customer.
And if you don't, is that I mean, like there were like a couple come to Jesus moments that we've had with people in marketing departments being like, if you don't start looking at this data, the people who come in and do your job after you will.
Yes.
I mean, that's
100%.
sort of the way it is. And I mean, even now though, in like a week and a half, we're going to like a really big company to talk to their entire North American marketing team, which is a very large group, and we're supposed to talk to them about data, and we're specifically supposed to address the fact that data isn't scary.
Yeah,
And that you
this is
should-
one of
It's like in
You're-
the contract.
this is one of the top
okay
brands,
to
and in all
use
the
it.
conversations,
Like we want our employees to know that like you're using data, but it's okay, and it's scary, but they shouldn't be afraid of it. And we're like, all right, well, okay.
Yeah, basically
But
our
it's-
job
but
there
it's
is to
not.
humanize the
Anyone
data.
that is at that training would record that, put it on the internet. I would love to see that.
I think that's changing, and it's going to change.
Yes.
It is.
Quick, much faster. Like, for example, I think with creators specifically, you're seeing more and more business savvy creators.
Mm-hmm.
People that just they're numbers driven, they're really sharp, like
Yeah.
a Mr. Beast type. And when before it was a very emotional experience working with creators. Like, I mean, even doing like collaborations with them, it's much more difficult because they really weren't figuring out how to be consistent with their programming and how to be consistent with their views and metrics. Yeah. But the issue right now, I'd say specifically in our world, from a marketing perspective, is there's too many marketing groups or executives that just like to check things off the list, and that's dangerous. And they just want to check it off the list and show that they've done it. And the companies are really thriving right now, especially in the influencer space or digital marketing. Are those companies that are very data savvy and doing everything they can to measure actual ROI, even if they're a big company, because you can measure it. Just most big companies are somewhat, not most, but there's a lot of big companies that are pretty lazy when it comes to actually trying to measure the sell.
It really takes effort, and it takes being really self-reflective and understanding that you're like we were talking about before, like how what comes back to you might not be what you want to see, but you have to do it, and you have to accept
If you don't
that.
do it, you're not going to be in existence. I mean,
Exactly.
that's the way I look at it.
No,
just
it's so true. You have to develop a thick skin to what the data
Dispassion
is
for
telling
what
you.
the data is.
And I think it's so funny because another one of our consulting clients, in one of our first projects that we did with them, they're like, hey, we want you to do a social media review of this campaign campaign we did on Twitter for X brand integration. We're like, okay, great, we can absolutely do that. And they did so many things wrong. And as part of our presentation, we listed it out. We're like, hey, you started, like your video has like a 6-second, cover art every single time you start a video. Twitter doesn't work. Like, you need to hit them right off the bat and then either insert in, like all this kind of like very basic best practice stuff. Like, we weren't even getting into the hard stuff. We were just like, from a very fundamental level, you are missing all of these opportunities here. And our partner, the kind of our contact who is managing the project, they're like, we need you to remove all of these slides because the person in there's going to be the person who worked on that campaign in the room hearing this, and we're like, isn't that
that's the point?
That's a good thing, right? Like, so that they can learn and grow and iterate. They're like, no, they might be offended by it, and we're like, but that doesn't. You have to be dispassionate about this stuff, and. For good, and what you brought up earlier about, new creators on YouTube, these Gen 4 creators being dispassionate, more numbers driven.
Yeah.
It's a double-sided, it's a double-edged sword, right? It's good
side.
because you have people who are approaching it the same way we are, which is like, let's look at the numbers, let's experiment. Did that work? Great. We've optimized our content a little bit better. Did that not work? Okay, like, that's kind of a bummer. I'm sad that we lost that video, but so be it. Let's move on. Let's grow. Let's continue to learn. But
you have some other things on that other side of the coin where we've worked with some of the Gen 4 creators who are also great, smart, amazing. But they really separate out their sort of like business from anything else. So they'll be like, this other creator, they want to collab with us and we can be friends with them or whatever, but their click-through rates aren't high enough and they don't drive enough subscribers and they don't get enough watch time. And I saw their last 5 videos and they're underperforming relative to their average. And I refuse to collab with them.
Wow.
And they're taking, and these are people like, they're supposed to be real good friends. This is like you take everything by the numbers, and also you run into this issue where that real-time data that we like love and nerd out about. We've had working with some of those creators, they'll put up a video and we'll get we've literally gotten like panicked phone calls 10 minutes after they've uploaded a video being like, I'm watching the real-time data and right now I'm 10,000 views under where I'm supposed to be. I'm going to take the video down. And we're like, it's been up for 10 minutes and you have to wrench them off the edge because you're like, you have to let things play out. You if this was an experiment that didn't work, you have to let it not work. Right. And then you figure out why. Because if you take it down if you take a video down 10 minutes after it goes up, you have no idea what happened to that video. You have no data going on. Exactly. You have nothing to analyze afterwards. You have to learn from things. But they're so into the data that sometimes they actually hamstring themselves.
Absolutely. What I find fascinating too, especially with the collab and they don't have the click-through rate and so on and so forth. They really know their audience. They're like, no, it's not the same audience. Yeah. It would be great. They have a bajillion followers and they get a ton of views, great click-through rate, but they're not the right audience. And at the end of the day, I think the AI is getting so smart on that audience, and those audiences that cross over and go from there, that's some very, very important data. And I've seen channels just explode because their content resonates really well with a particular audience. And it doesn't matter if they're small or big, they start to collaborate, and that's where, magic happens.
Yeah, you start to have that real synergistic programming loop happen, and everyone just grows together.
We've also asked for
Hasn't
years for...
It's happened to a point where...
I think early on you could always tell the creators that acted like an island, or an island that they end up, not lasting long. Then everyone else that was collaborating all the time were always the ones that skyrocket.
Let me tell you, Matthias, let me just give you a perfect example. So Matthias... brilliant YouTuber, his pacing and everything's brilliant. His thumbnails are amazing. His titles, so on and so forth. But it's like once you understand your avatar, it's like, okay, what else can we do? And he's built himself a little network of channels. Not little, I mean,
they're pretty substantial at this point.
Very, very, very substantial. 300, 400 million views a month. But it's just like they really understand their avatar too. And the smart thing is they're like, look, we can create another channel for people that are starting to get disconnected with this content because they're growing up.
Yeah.
What's the next thing for them to
move on
to go to? And so that's where it's at. And I think those types of collaborations where the creator can say, look, I can bring someone in, start a channel, we can start to use the audience over there and kind of grow it from there. That's where we're going to see a lot of differences in the world.
Oh yeah. And I mean, just putting a cap on that whole idea of creating a network of channels, one of the things that we always asked YouTube for is overlap data between channels. Even if
No, of course not.
we've heard rumors of like ones that you own, like if like he owns a network of channels, right? Wouldn't it be nice to see how many of those subscribers actually overlap, so you could have an accurate total subscriber number rather than just adding one channel's worth of subscribers to another, because you know there's significant overlap there,
So
right?
one tool that I would love to have in the new Studio Beta 2 is to switch toggle between subscriber and non-subscriber. Because it's just it shocks everyone when they're like, oh, they're not subscribed to me, and yet they're watching my content.
Yeah.
Like, well, then it doesn't matter. But I do believe that it's like, if we could see a little bit more data on the crossover, that would make creators a lot more consistent and put out better content, which would achieve the goal of what YouTube wants, which is people to watch more.
Yep.
So
Yeah, I agree.
okay, so we've gone through a lot.
Well, I had nothing there. The one thing I do want to say, I don't know. It felt like we were wrapping this up.
We're not wrapping it up.
Oh, great.
We're just
Well,
getting started
oh,
here.
great.
One more time.
Good. That's good to hear, because the thing I wanted to throw out there, and I didn't know if the discussion was going to deviate away from this, but it's tangentially related to what we were talking about, which is people underestimating how the algorithm ultimately dictates what people watch and content tastes and trends. Like, it's easy to say, like, oh yeah, you optimize for watch time and this and that, or like the content sucked or whatever, and it underperformed. But I think one thing that YouTube itself doesn't really like acknowledge, and that audiences don't really think about, is that their tastes are being influenced by the priorities of the platform and what the algorithm chooses to show them, right?
And what creators will make in the future too. Because I mean, that it's just kind of one of those things that's like, oh, here we're going to show this content, they're really engaging with it, and then people are going to look at that, oh man, I got a whole bunch of views and a whole bunch of engagement, I'm going to make a video just like it. Just kind of piggyback off that. So.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where, like, do you think that people naturally gravitated toward like the average watch time now of like 15-minute videos on YouTube? No, not necessarily, but that's what the algorithm has kind of pushed people into. And so it's easy to, like, we're talking about how AI and data are helping to inform like very like granular data-driven decisions on individual pieces of content. But I think one thing that deserves mention is the fact that from a platform standpoint, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, they all have their priorities, and the algorithms are kind of funneling people into certain types of content. And that in turn is affecting like, oh, I'm really excited about this person's content because they're playing into what the algorithm is. Like the subliminal message behind it all is they're playing into what the algorithm wants me to be consuming. Like, I'm really excited about sports content. That's probably because the algorithm and like all the features and suggested video are giving you sports content, so that way like sports becomes a more viable thing on the platform, and it becomes a new vertical, and food, and you see those things grow.
Podcasts, I think YouTube's going to overtake a lot of the platforms when it comes to podcasts.
Sure.
Like, that's just exploding right now. And I mean, that's what I've been gravitating towards.
Oh my gosh, it's almost like you created this
kinda like we're
podcast,
on the
right?
podcast
Right? It's
right
like,
now
oh my,
Right.
interesting.
Really?
Content strategies, eh?
I know it's about to explode.
Savvy
It
creators,
already
huh?
has. But no, well, and I think it's because of the watch time. I mean,
oh yeah.
You have like a Joe Rogan that uploads a video a week that's 2 hours long, and then he edits it all up and has a bunch of clips out there as well. And I mean, it's really smart, and there's a lot of people doing that. It's becoming its own vertical, and that's exciting, especially from me, like from the marketing side, because podcasts for me have, when it comes to like doing brand integration or sponsorships, have always kind of had like a weakness where it's too radio-esque, where it's like, hey, now check this out at .com,
right?
And there's no linking out or anything like that. And now I feel like you can do a more effective integration where it's more naturally integrated that can actually link out instead of having to have some weird customized URL.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
The thing that we always tell our consulting clients is, you really have to match the content for the platform that it's airing on, right? 15 minutes, good standard, like general best practice on YouTube at this point. Like, you can go into granular about the verticals, but like say 15 minutes. 15 minutes is never going to work on Facebook unless it's in very specific formats, because Facebook just, in general, the audience isn't there to watch something that long. There's much closer to like 1, 2, 3,
Sure.
like that popcorn, viral content that started on YouTube. But podcasts are really interesting because they're one of the few formats that really kind of run the gamut and can span a lot of different platforms,
Right.
both visual platform and sound only platform. And so they're one of the most versatile content verticals out there for exactly that reason, because people are, they're playing into those watch time algorithms. You can have a very simple video, like bonus to it that allows you to upload it onto YouTube and Facebook and things like that. But then it also plays off of all the places podcasts normally get distributed. And so content in general, it's difficult to kind of syndicate to a lot of different places. Like, you can do it, but will it actually succeed in those places?
Right.
It's usually not worth the time. But podcast is one of those few that actually is optimized for a lot of different platforms and can see its own success in a lot of different places.
And I think too, it's like the generation that's actually listening or watching the podcast. It's like there's certain types of things that they want to consume. Like when they go to YouTube, generally it's like, I want to be entertained, I want to be educated.
Yep.
From there. With podcasts, though, it's just more, hey, I got some time to spare. What am I going to listen to on the plane?
Yeah.
Or
It's
at night or
replaced
in the morning?
radio on the commute.
Exactly.
It's replaced reading a book on an airplane. One of the great things about podcasts is that it's everywhere, and you can download them, you can take them with you. They feel like such a more flexible format than video, and they feel so much more transportable than something like radio, right?
Absolutely. Now let's kind of break it down, because I think you guys know the AI so well. I mean, you consult for different brands and businesses and channels that are out there. What do you do when you're creating content? Like, take us through the process when you create a content. Like, what do you think about beforehand, before you actually pick up the camera and start recording?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing, and I think this is a step in the process that everyone always overlooks, is first asking, what's the goal of the piece of content?
Yeah.
Not every video is going to accomplish the same goal as any other video. Like,
And
and it can't accomplish everything.
Yeah,
either.
that's the big one. One video cannot accomplish 5 different goals. You have to have one it's
One
basically
finish line.
one
Yeah, that's right.
one video, one goal.
Right.
And that's the goal of that video. Next time, focus on something else, but people get they refuse to put on blinders when they're creating content a lot of times, and so they're like, well, I wanted to get a lot of views and a lot of likes and a lot of comments, and I want it to be a subscriber driver, and I want it to be, embedded in X, Y, and Z websites. And you cannot do that all at once.
Right. And so the first question that we always ask ourselves is like, okay, what on our channel do we need more of, and like what are the videos that are gonna help us get there, right? And so we try in our programming calendars to find a proper cadence of, this is a subscriber building episode that's going to get wider dissemination, get people excited about covering a trending topic or something that's very relevant, that we then do a very strong call to subscribe at the end that's going to get people to kind of become new followers.
Where
on
do you
the
do
channel.
your research? I mean, is that something that you're just kind of going out through YouTube and say, okay, here's some things that are trending there? Are you looking at that? Are you going into Reddit? What are you?
A lot of it is by being content consumers ourselves and understanding what people are watching and trying to understand why that's an appealing content trend for whatever reason. It's also, some of it's our personal taste, but it's really trying to be attuned to what has the audience responded to recently, combined with what are we seeing on the platform, and then we take into account other things that we've done in the past, just that we have as underlying data, like what are the personality traits of our audience, because we've run surveys on that, and what are the identities that our audience most gravitates toward, because we've run surveys on that too. And so we have a set of underlying data, we have what has our audience responded to recently, and we have what's floating around out there that we think aligns with the interests that exist in our core fan base,
and where we can add value through our video, our
Exactly.
unique take on whatever the topic is, or through our video component. So that's where it starts. So like, you have your subscriber building episodes, you have your our monetization episodes, where it's like, hey, this is a video that's just going to monetize better than other videos in our repertoire because it has more searchable key phrases. It has something that is
it's building on the
high
hype of something that's
Right.
that's
That's
hot
awesome.
right now, and that we know there are big marketing dollars behind. So every once in a while, there's that. We do collaboration vehicles where We know that we're looking to cross over with someone else's audience, or we are directly crossing over by actually doing a collaboration.
Yeah. And then things like, and then the ones that are super serving the fans, where we're like, hey, we know that this one isn't going to, blow. It's not going to be the number one video on trending or whatever.
Creates loyalty.
But yeah, it's of a small niche franchise or of a topic that they come to us specifically for. It might not have wider audience appeal, but for the people who've been following us for all these years, it's something that they'll appreciate, they'll know, and will show them that, hey, we are still, doing the content for you as well, and we're still very much in touch with this community. And we do that for game theory, we do that for film theory, we do that for GT Live too. And I think that's another place that people overlook is live streams. Again, people are like, I'm just gonna flip on a camera and do whatever, and it's gonna work. Yeah, I'm going live. We're doing it live, And they're like,
wait, gotta do a story first.
Right, yeah, let me story it, let me promote it on Twitter, and then I have no idea what I'm gonna do when I actually flip on the camera. And it's one of those things that I think people overlook. Like, live is content just like anything else, and people, like, sure, you might get a couple views from doing off the cuff whatever, but having a structured goal, a narrative, a purpose for doing that live stream is important. So even when we're programming
that
GT
is
Live,
so hard for a lot of creators.
It is.
Like, seriously, I don't like. We have the same discussion when I'm with some consulting clients, but it's like at the end of the day, it's like, wait a minute, I have to put some effort into this beforehand. I mean, I can't just turn the camera on and just go.
Right.
People love me.
Yeah, they're gonna watch everything that I do. Yeah. Why not? Yeah.
So that's awesome. I watch a lot of your content. I had no idea how calculated it was.
It's just
okay. Right now, let's build loyalty.
He's only giving you this
subscribers.
Much, this much.
Yeah, right. No, that's awesome. So with all these different goals, how do you incorporate a brand? Like, and where does it fall in, like, I mean, is a brand integration its own goal, or is it like, and what type of video does it perform best in? Is it the one where you guys are going for subscribers or loyalty or monetization?
Depends on the brand.
Yeah.
Right. It all depends on so whatever brand we're working with, right, is going to have a specific audience in mind, and hopefully they're willing to share that with us. And I mean, even that's a struggle sometimes. Like, not even like what demographics are you going for? I mean, that should be the basic, but I mean, what type of person? What do you actually want to be reaching with this ad? Yeah, what are the psychographics? What should they be interested in? What should they be passionate about? What adjacent franchises or products or kinds of things would be in their world? And if we know that, first of all, the more we know, the better job we can do, right? Because the more information we have, the more we can build a world around the brand that we're working with, right? And do that in a voice that the audience understands, because we're speaking to them from a place where we live, and hopefully something that we really genuinely care about, and then talking to them about how it just sort of naturally fits into the world that they want to be in. So it really depends on the brand we're working with, and we try really hard to pair the content directly to the brand. And luckily, with what the content that we do and the brand that we have a lot of flexibility, right? We work across all video games and all movies and all TV shows. So we have, I think, the luxury of being able to say, okay, this brand we can pair with this interesting movie that segues really nicely into talking about it, or we can pair the brand with the type of movie that their audience is really going to love or whatever.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, again, just like we ask ourselves the question of, like, what is the goal of this individual piece of content, we also ask, it's the first question that we ask brands or agencies when we're starting discussions around a brand deal, like, what are the goals of your campaign and where does our video fit into that, right? Yeah. And it boggles our mind that question a lot of time throws them for a loop. Like, they're, what is this? I need goals with it, and it's like, yes.
Either they don't have an answer, or they don't want to share it with us, which doesn't really make sense when we're partners.
Yeah,
so
like
we're supposed to,
like,
we're on their side.
Right, exactly.
Well, you need to know their objectives,
right?
Or it's just not going to work.
Right, exactly.
The brand needs to bring to the table their objectives, like their goals.
Yeah.
Share their vision with you.
Yeah.
You come back with a recommendation because you know your audience. You've built up your audience. Yeah. You know what they're going to react positively or negatively to. And then as a result, just naturally, your audience is happy that the brand, is a good part of the content. It's that's empowering
Exactly.
content and not disrupted anything.
Yeah, they've helped us do something new or whatever. But I will say that a brand coming back with the objective of, oh, we want to raise awareness, that's not an objective. It's like,
Let it be said.
what do
let it
you,
be
that's
known
not
right
an
now.
objective. Raising awareness by itself with no metrics or quantitative anything around that is not a goal. That's not something that we can really respond to very well. It's like, if you raise awareness, okay, does that mean you want the
let's get
video
20
to
videos.
Right.
reach this number of people? Do you want this number of people to go to check out a website? What does raising awareness actually mean for that brand? What are the specific metrics that they're actually measuring
to narrow
success
it
by?
down.
And they have to use data to do that.
Yes.
But it does boil down to, like, in general, I can say, like, if a brand is looking for conversions or looking for, people to actually click the link or, subscribe to their service or check out the product or whatever, doing things that are more in the audience's wheelhouse and more of those, like, fan servicey episodes, though, rather than, like, the subscriber growth and this and that, like, of the content categories that as we define them, that's the one that tends to yield the best results for conversion-based brand deals. Just because, and it makes sense when you think about it, right? Because they're invested in who we are, they're invested in our content, and they trust us, and so we like to say, whenever you do a brand deal, every time you do a video, you're investing into this bank of trust with an audience, right? And every time it's a good video, they're, like, more invested. They're depositing more into that bank, and it's a nice little pot. Every time you ask the audience to do something, you're making a withdrawal from that bank, right? And sometimes it's a very minor withdrawal where it's like, watch this other video, low friction, easy ask, easy to ignore. It's not impeding on the content. That's a very small withdrawal. Follow me on a social channel. Okay, a little bit more because you're pushing them off platform or whatever. Let me do a brand deal. That becomes a much larger withdrawal, especially if it's a poor fit or poorly integrated into the piece of content. And so all as content creators, as influencers, as brands, you have to be aware of kind of where that deposit sits, how those asks are being, where those asks are falling with the audience, and then making sure to maintain that you're finding the best fit possible, the lowest friction possible, and then, if you do a big ask, making sure that you're making more deposits into that bank account, so that way, you're not going bankrupt or you're not overdrawing your account, as it were.
Yeah. No, I think for, like, brands today, I think it's a lot more difficult than most brands realize it is. Because, I mean, you're mentioning earlier, like, how there's, like, different verticals that have different cadences. And, like, there's going to be every vertical is going to react potentially differently, to your brand as well. And with the influencers that you work with. Like, for example, you would think if it has more views, it's going to give you more conversions. But most likely, if you're going to work with, let's say, 5 music videos and then, like, let's say 5 beauty channels, the beauty channels might barely get over 200,000 views,
right,
or 50,000 views, and these music videos might get 100 million views. You might, there's a good chance you're going to get more conversions from the beauty channels.
Yep.
And well, sometimes when brands get into the space, it's like, okay, we just need to work with 5 creators, when really they need to be working with dozens and dozens, and then figuring out how they optimize their strategy to be more successful. And so when we talk about, like, AI, like that's been my number one focus as the CEO of the company I work at is building models and doing deep learning neural networks and figuring out how to predict success metrics for brands on those different verticals. Like, okay, which areas are you going to get the highest organic views? Which areas are you going to get the highest click-through rate? Which areas are you going to get the highest sales? And what's amazing is there's more content today on this planet than there ever has been. And what that means is there's more data than there's ever been. Well, there's thousands. And there's millions of videos out there. And so creating, algorithms like this, there's never been a better time, because you can literally, as long as you have the data from A to Z, let's say like 2 conversions, you can literally, take, several thousand videos, look at the structured data, the stuff that you put in a spreadsheet, what are the views, what were the click-through rates, what is the sentiment, et cetera. But then you can also now, look at the content in those thousands of different videos, something that us as humans can't just look at and see patterns. And and just you can have the machines or like the AI look at that content from the audio to the visual, to the timing and the pacing, and find success patterns.
Yeah.
And find other patterns. And like right now, just with in this area of AI, we're finding that when it comes to conversions, our machines are 10 times more effective in predicting conversions than our best humans.
Yeah.
We've had one client that has seen a 10x increase in sales as a result of just using like the AI. And then when it comes to like predicting views or predicting engagements, it's a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah.
It's like 100 times more effective
Yeah.
than
Right.
a human.
Well, I think the complexity of advertising now has literally transformed. You go back just several years ago, it's like, okay, you're going to go in radio. Okay, we're doing the radio thing.
Right.
We're going to take it and add in the newspaper.
Right, yeah.
Here we go. And it's just got more and more complex.
Yeah.
And one thing, in my background's in advertising, like that's where I spend a lot of my consulting, a lot of different projects and so on. But at the end of the day, it's really a complex way to reach your audience now. And it's like, how do you do that? It's like they're all out there. How do you do it? And when you integrate it to a brand or an influencer, it's even more complicated because then you don't even know their data.
Right.
Yeah.
Like how many creators actually share all the data?
90% of the data though is the unstructured data.
Yeah. Well,
Like, that's what's funny. Is like and I'd say probably 99% of brands are only using 10% of the structured.
Yeah.
And so things are shifting
Sure,
really quickly
absolutely.
right now.
That's my point. I think for the future of advertising, it's going to be AI driven. It's like we need to predictively say, hey, look at this cluster of channels because this is this
And
is
I'd even
something.
go
Oh,
ahead
yeah,
of
it's
that. I'd
amazing.
say it's going to be AI driven in content.
Oh,
Because if you
Oh,
look
yeah.
at everything, I think the up and coming generations are getting even more tired of traditional ads.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
tired of
Absolutely.
seeing pre-rolls.
Yes.
Like my daughter, she's freaking 3. We use YouTube Premium, and we try to get her away from ads. We use Netflix with her. And
Right.
Yeah.
Sure, of course.
Whenever she sees an ad, she literally
Freaks out.
Just cries.
freaks out
Just-
and
just cries.
No,
Like,
hits the iPad. She has a tantrum. She freaks out about
It's
this
Ricky's
kind of
daughter, so it's good.
she's a lot like me, but
Lackluster content.
so, one thing. And this is why it's so important, and this is why AI around video is so important, because it's not just entertainment that's changing.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be changing around entertainment, and that's advertising.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
as trends are going to Amazon Prime, or trends are going, to Netflix or YouTube Premium, I think there's going to be more and more people and consumers that are going to try to avoid advertising at all costs.
Yeah.
And so the tactics that you guys do in building content and using AI to figure out how to do that, or figure out how to trigger or benefit from the algorithm, advertisers are going to have to do working with the content.
Advertisers
Because
are
there's
also
nothing
going to
there
get
right now.
They're
It's
going to
very
get
rare.
so much smarter though as well. Like one of the things that we were just talking about the other day was ESPN's push toward mood-based advertising.
Yeah, Project
which is,
Feels.
which is scary. Yeah, Project Feels, where
is crazy.
where like if you're watching it, if they analyze your entire viewer behavior, they know that you watch a specific team, like religiously or whatever, and that team is doing really well that season or that particular game or whatever, they will feed you an ad that plays into the emotion that you're already feeling, or takes the emotion that you're feeling and uses it to propel you into an ad to make you more likely to respond to that advertisement.
Yeah,
And
so it's the difference of
it's
like
incredible.
the Cleveland Cavaliers, great season, fantastic. Wow, our city has hope for a sports championship finally. Like, let's feed them ads that play into that,
Yeah.
and thus see how the conversions are higher because we're giving them positive
Specific
feeling
ads
emotion.
that are supposed to, that are supposed to
And
continue
then what
to
happened
trigger
when
those
LeBron
emotions.
went to the
Right,
Lakers?
and then all of a
Exactly.
sudden it's like, and then LeBron,
let's move it to the Lakers now.
Yeah, well, and now all of a sudden we push those positive feel ads over to the Lakers, and Cleveland is once again in the sports doldrums as we always are. Like as the ebbing and flow of the tides go, so too does Cleveland sports flow. But now they're gonna funnel a bunch of like, hey, here's messages of hope, or like let's look at the
Or nostalgia. Yeah, exactly. That kind of thing. So they can, advertising is getting so much smarter, and this project with ESPN, Project Feels, they want to push that through to all of the rest of Disney content. So you imagine that going to children's advertising, going to family advertising where there's already heightened emotions and really strong emotional bonds between the people asking for the product and the people buying them.
Yeah.
So it's that pester power becomes that much stronger. Like
that's interesting.
all of the things that we already know about the psychology of advertising gets taken to a completely different level when you're able to target people to that level of specificity.
So I think it's going to get scarier.
Of course.
More black.
We need some doom and gloom here.
So doom and gloom, and then we're going to wrap up.
Well, from targeting, it's just a couple like you feed a couple of like smart target. This gives people a positive mood, a negative mood, whatever. You feed that. This is what a high converting video sounds like and feels like and looks like. This is what a low converting video looks like and feels like. You feed that into a system, and all of a sudden, like it's a hop, skip, and a jump away to actually artificially creating like the perfect formula of content to do X, Y, or Z.
Right. No, so that's interesting. Well, I think it's going to get. I mean, I think it's possible to get to the point where we look at eye-open views. So. Where your device is going to see if your eyes are open if you're watching.
Where it's at.
And
It's
then
like I have a heat map.
if you do become emotional, or if you do become angry, or if you do laugh, I mean, data is going to get much more intense.
I'm moving
once
to
we
the
have
desert.
those metrics.
Those facial
Because the AI will be able to see live if you're reacting positively or negatively. And who knows, maybe there's going to be like an A/B testing where there can be different iterations of that ad where it switches.
And that phone is in your hand, and it can sense that your blood sweating.
Like
Oh,
in the
yeah.
ad itself,
In the ad itself,
Okay, so we've covered a lot. But there's one question that I need to ask. This is a very, very, very important question.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Brace yourself.
I gotta give it some context. Like, I don't know how you guys work together, husband and wife. Let me just give you some context.
Start with this.
No. Like, literally,
I'm so curious to see what
Ricky's wife is working for Ricky, and
She had.
You
You
fired
fired your wife?
Okay,
You fired her?
There's a
Oh,
rumor.
she is delightful.
I know.
there's a-
She's
there's
a
a-
lovely person.
She was creating a resistance against me.
Oh, yeah. No, you have to quell that. You have to
So
strike
this
that
is what
down.
happened. This is
No.
what happened. Man, Derral. Okay, let me give context.
Give her the pink
So
slip.
there was a rumor that I fired her twice, and it's not true.
just once.
She got fired once, then she came back and she quit, and that's what happened.
Two
And-
seconds after.
That's amazing.
You know,
You
you know,
can't fire me.
8 months of marriage counseling. We're super happy today. I was joking, but no.
There's some great YouTube videos for that.
She actually used to work with me before I sold Plaid to Ben and in the Plaid days, and she actually did a lot of really good work, but the first time.
She did a lot of really good work.
Yeah,
I feel like it's kind of soft.
Keep digging, buddy.
we were misaligned and it didn't work out.
Stop
But the
here.
same thing happened with Derral.
Recorded.
Derral, your turn. But anyways, it worked out, and she wanted to go into a different career. Okay, done.
All right.
Next.
Because when I first started my business, I was at the kitchen table, and my wife
yeah.
kicked me out of the house. She's like, "You can't even be here. Just go."
Well,
So,
the problem
but
is
anyway.
you take work home, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
Dazi and I wouldn't stop
yeah.
talking about working with creators and with content. Like,
Sure.
that was the conversation. I mean, after work, and we were talking about. I mean, we didn't necessarily work closely together.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where we couldn't turn it off.
Yeah.
So how are you guys doing this?
like,
Yeah,
this is
because
an
you guys are
anomaly.
like
This is
business partners
seriously.
to the whole other level.
How do you separate
running
work?
multiple businesses?
Right, it's
business.
funny to hear you
We actually
say.
get this question a lot.
It's funny to hear you say take work home because home is work
Yeah.
for us. So like there isn't even a home to take it home to because it's just there.
There it is.
So how do we do it, Steph?
There we go.
Yeah, right.
Answer.
There it is. That's what you need to know.
No, I mean honestly, though, I think as horrible as this is to say, separate. Like, how do you separate work and life? You don't. It's everything is a gray area, and I know that that's like it feels like the worst answer you could give, but everything is kind of a gray area. I will say, when we first started working together, this was when Matthew had quit his job for about 4 months. I was 6 months after him. So he quit his job. 6 months later, I quit my other full-time job, and we worked together on YouTube. From the day I quit, the first 4 months that we worked together, we worked around the clock. We got up at 7 a.m. We worked till 11 p.m. We went to bed. There were no weekends. There were no holidays. There was nothing. We got to Christmas, and we realized that we had filmed for 12 hours on Christmas Day.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And we got to the end of that day.
True entrepreneurs.
I mean, yeah, it was.
The thing
Merry
was, no,
Christmas.
we
Right.
got to the end of the day and we realized that not only were the last 4 months completely gone, like we had no memory of what had even happened. We literally took no days off ever. And we got to the end of that and we were like, never again. This cannot go on, and we have to stop this. And we did. And it took us, and we were still working on it 4 years later, but we clawed back like at first it was like a couple of nights a week. It was literally like Saturday night. We were like, yes, we scored.
Yeah,
Saturday night.
Literally Saturday night was like the
and
first
that was
thing.
it.
Yeah.
And then we got like a couple of other nights a week. And then we were like, when we had a baby 6 months ago, and like about a year before that, we were like, we need a weekend, we need weekends. And so we clawed back like part of our weekends. And it would be totally lying if it wasn't like some nights we are up at 11, 12, 1 a.m. talking about work. But other nights we're not, and we're okay with it. And that's good. And we take weekend days off sometimes. And yes, we check in and do emails. And yes, at the end of the day, like there's recording to do, there's notes to give on a script, whatever there is. But we can do that and then let it go. Which was something that we had to work on. And then the other instance, like there have been like a couple of those inflection points, right? There was a trip that we took to Japan, which was a wonderful trip. We were having an amazing time, but we got there and like on the second day, we were taking videos and pictures, and we were like getting really agitated about these videos and pictures that we were taking. And we were like, what are we taking these for? We had to like actually have a discussion about, are we taking these for Instagram or for YouTube or something, or are these like family photos? Yeah. And so we had to like draw some bright lines.
It's true. We had to start define like having very like granular conversations about what is life and what is content.
Yeah.
And where do those lines exist, and keeping those lines very consistent and very clear amongst the two of us.
Yeah.
Because
and we were always on the same side. It was never like we were having like fights about it. It was just like, this sucks. How do we figure this out?
Yeah, the gray areas were always really tough to deal with, and so you never knew what headspace you had to be in. And so having those sorts of conversations really were the thing that helped delineate. And I think at the end of the day, that's how this is able to work, right? Is when we first started working together, and still to this day, it's just like you approach data. It's go in without an ego, go in knowing that the other person is always going to be your team member and always by your side and always want the best for both of us. You know, we are working on a project together, but at the end of the day, this is what matters most. Exactly. And so if changes need to be made, if feelings are like, if someone's feeling overwhelmed or whatever, like
if there needs to be feedback in one direction or another, you give it and you try and take it as much as you can without worrying without it being a personal thing.
Yeah. So and a great story to just end on was I didn't realize that people didn't work the same way I work. Like in all honesty, because you don't think to discuss that sort of thing. Like, you know, a person, you know, they're your wife, whatever. Like, you think you know them so well that like, why would you think to ask? Like, but my working style is I will encounter a problem and I will beat my head against the wall until I break through that problem and I solve it and it's done and it's out to pasture.
You lose 48 hours.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it's frustrating and I'm sleepless and I'm angry, but I get through it. Stephanie can't do that. Like, she has to, like, the best way that she functions is by taking a break, clearing her head, working on other things, taking a walk, whatever, and then coming back to the problem refreshed, and all of a sudden all these new avenues and solutions have opened up.
I could do that.
Right? I do too, but I can't. And so there was this, and the two of us are like tremendously competitive, and so there was this competition. Like, Stephanie would feel guilty that I was still there at the desk working, and so
he's like miserable, and I'm like, why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you doing this?
And so there was this, like, she was feeling pressure to work my way. I was, you know, feeling bad because she wasn't getting to work the way that she wanted, and so we needed this open and outright discussion in that first year, really, of like, hey, you feel free to work the way that you do. I'll work the way that I do. It's fine that they're two different ways. At the end of the day, we're working towards the same goal, and there's no competition. No one's doing more work than the other person.
That's not possible. Neither of us can work any more than we are.
Right. So like when you're working at max capacity, there is nothing else. But at the end of the day, I think that's what it really boiled down to, is like communicate. and about things that you don't think that you need to communicate about your feelings. Like, just constantly check in. Or how are you doing? Are you doing okay? Let's talk about that.
So the same thing that you're saying for brands, where they're really afraid to look at the analytics. You're just okay, now,
It is.
That's what it is.
Yeah,
It's just
look at the data.
Look at the data.
It is. Absolutely.
Data doesn't lie.
Yeah.
Right.
It will fix all.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you guys so much for coming in.
Thank
and,
you.
and being a part of it.
Thank you so much for having us.
This has just been fun. I could literally do this for hours, like especially the AI stuff. I wanted more. We'll have to have him back.
Hey, any time, we're just a hop, skip, and a jumping away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. Make sure that you actually download this for your own fun for the future. And please don't fire your wife. It didn't work out very good for Ricky.
Oh, no.
Go disrupt the world.
Be like the Patricks.